I can give you observations on, the water's warmer, the Gulf Stream seems to be moving a little more actively. We get arms of the Gulf Stream that come and interrupt our fishing. We get many more warm core rings than we ever used to. There's a lot, as Denny said. It's unmistakable. There are changes in the last 10 years that seem to be rapid and relatively intense. And it's not just all warming. I think last year, in the marine environment, we had some of the coldest sea surface temperature, followed almost instantly by some of the warmest. It was just a really quick flip-flop. So there's a lot of things going on, but both Denny and I are lobstermen. I think we've seen molting seasonality change. We've seen the length of the molt change. We've seen it appears that lobsters stay softer, which means they don't really get out of their molt for quite a long time. Now, whether this is ocean acidification or not, I'm not sure. That's one of my biggest concerns, not for only for lobsters, but for clams, quahogs, all shellfish and crustaceans. That's something that could have a real impact on us. But to build a little bit upon what the last gentleman was speaking about, I don't think everything has to have a negative connotation. As Denny alluded, some of our species, lobster seems to be moving out of the bay into the more near shore because the habitat seems to be a little more suitable. But we've also had an explosion of crab population. We have blue crabs in Narragansett Bay that, there's no commercial fishery allowed on this, but they are populating the bay. The Jonah crab population has just exploded exponentially, both near shore and offshore. Black sea bass are here in abundance that nobody has ever seen. So my point is, I think there will be winners and there'll be losers. Some of the species will go and seek alternative habitats that are more conducive, but there are other areas are going through this, and we will probably inherit some of their fish. What I think both of us feel, in order for industry to survive and to adapt to this and to mitigate the effects of the climate change, we need an adaptive and flexible management system. We need a system that can be as adaptive and flexible and change as rapidly as our environment is. And that is going to be critical to keeping the local fishing industry vital through all of this. Currently, we don't have such a system. And we're saddled with a system that's prone to not readily recognizing overharvesting of some species and perpetuating underharvesting of healthy ones. And this inability to adapt costs the industry millions, and therefore the state and federal economy, state and local economy, as well. A good management system is highly dependent on getting good scientific advice as to the status of the stocks. And this good scientific advice is highly dependent on the quality and quantity of the data that scientists need and use to populate stock assessments. State and federal surveys are the typical collectors of this data. Most surveys were designed when conditions were relatively static. Today's environment is anything but. There's been a reluctance to kind of get off the old protocols. The state surveys are pretty much strictly bound to 3 miles, 3 miles and at the same time we have populations that are moving offshore. So more data is desperately needed that is collected on a year-round basis and over a greater spatial distribution. The obvious and economical solution is to solicit industry to be equal partners in this data collection program. We understand budget constraints probably won't allow both the federal and state data collectors to really to do any more than they're doing. So it just seems obvious that industry needs to become equal partners in that project. Some of this exists today, but needs to be expanded exponentially. Scientists and fishermen need to grow to gain a much higher level of trust between each other and become true partners. And I think this is the only way that the fishing industry can stay vital and solvent through these challenging times.